Walter Block.
Spell it as well.
WALTERBLOCK.
And what's your title?
Professor.
Professor? Oh, you want, okay.
I have a big, long, fancy title.
Then professor will do.
Okay.
First, give me a quick little kind of background. What is Austrian School Economic Theory?
The Austrian School of Economic Theory is a school of economic theory, which means that it tries to understand and explain economic reality. Why prices are the way they are, why we have unemployment, why we have a business cycle, why we have shortages, unemployment, whatever. Just like every other economic theory or economic school, all economics is an attempt to explain and understand economic reality. Where is the Austrian school different? Well, first of all, I should say that it has nothing to do with the economics of the country Austria. Rather, it emanates from the fact that the creators of it, the original people, Menger, Bombewerk, Mises, Hayek, all came from Austria. It's similar to the Chicago School of Economics. It's got nothing to do with the city of Chicago's economics. It's just that the creators and progenitors of it, like Milton Friedman and George Stigler, all were at the University of Chicago in Chicago. Apart from the geographical issue, the unique aspect of Austrian economics is that it is not an empirical science like mainstream economics. Rather, it's a branch of logic. It starts from certain premises like human action, that people act in order to improve their circumstances compared to what they would be if they didn't act, and it deduces from that. So it's not an empirical science in the sense that it creates hypotheses and tests them. Rather, it creates economic law. So let me give you an example. Let's say the minimum wage law. We believe that it really is a law, that when you have a minimum wage, you'll create unemployment for people who are whose productivity is below that level stipulated by the minimum wage. Whereas the mainstream doesn't really have it as an economic law. It sees it rather as a hypothesis to be tested and possibly accepted or rejected based on what the empirical evidence shows. We don't go for that. We Austrians say that it's an economic law, and necessarily true, assuming other things equal, that a minimum wage law at $5 an hour will unemploy everyone whose productivity is below $5 an hour in equilibrium. So it's a different way of looking at things, and that's the unique aspect of Austrian economics. There might be 15 or 20 other elements of economics where we diverge from the mainstream, but that's the main one.
And so, explain kind of why did that split happen? Why is there the mainstream, and why does the Austrian and the Mises kind of get pushed aside?
Why do we get pushed aside? Because they see us as unscientific. They see us as a cult or a religion. Because we don't test hypotheses. We are rather a branch of logic, or mathematics, if you will, where they don't test hypotheses either. That's one reason why we're pushed aside. Another reason why we're pushed aside is that most of us, virtually all of us, although it's not necessarily true, but it just so happens that are very, very free enterprise, but not qua Austrians, qua political theorists. Namely, most Austrian economists are very, very free enterprise, whereas the mainstream, including the Chicago School, who has the reputation for being free enterprise, are not really. They're compromisers. They're wet. They make all sorts of concessions to socialism and government intervention.
So look a little bit at the government today. How would you or someone else who believes in the Austrian theory of economics try to change our federal government?
Well, strictly speaking, qua Austrian economists, we have no views about changing anything, because qua economics, there's a difference between normative economics and positive economics, and we're all positive economists, which means we just try to explain and understand what's going on. We only as normative economists can we say, well, we ought to do this or ought to do that. We can have an if-then statement. We can say, if you want to have peace and prosperity, then you have to do this. So as Austrian economists, we could do that. I would say that perhaps the most famous person nowadays in the U.S. who is an exponent, an expounder of Austrian economics, is Ron Paul. So when you ask that question, it's sort of tricky, because if you say, what would Austrian economists do with the government, or how do we say that the government should change, we have no comment at all. And no economist could have any comment, strictly speaking, if you said qua economist. But if you said, well, if you want peace and prosperity, what's the best way to go? Or if you said, as a normative economist, namely not as an economist, but as a libertarian political theoretician, what's your analysis of what we should do with government? The Ron Paul answer, and my answer, is pretty much get rid of it. Because government is a scandal, it's an outrage, it's a violation of rights, and it's economically inefficient. We're now subtly shifting from Austrian economics into libertarianism. And this question is much better asked of a libertarian, and I happen to be a libertarian, so I can answer it. And I would say that there are 4 branches of libertarianism. At the top, the best ones, the most consistent ones, with the non-aggression principle. That's the essence of libertarianism, that you got to keep your mitts to yourself. I got to keep my mitts to myself. Unless we have permission, as in boxing, if we agree to box, then I can punch you and you can't say, oh, rights violation. So the strictest sense of libertarianism would be anarcho-libertarianism, and you'd say just get rid of government, period, because it's necessarily a violent institution. It taxes people that have never agreed to be taxed, who have never agreed to be part of the government. The next level down would be minarchism, minimal government libertarianism, where you say that the government has only one role, and that's to protect people and property rights, personal rights and property rights. And for that, you need 3 institutions. Armies to keep foreign bad guys off of us, not to go around spreading democracy, but to just defend the country. Police to keep local bad guys off of us, not to stop victimless crimes like drugs or consensual sex or whatever, just stopping murder and rape and theft. And then courts to tell who the good guys and the bad guys are. And that would be mainly Ayn Rand. She would be mostly associated with that view, or maybe Robert Nozick. Third down would be Ron Paul, where he's a constitutionalist. He wants to get back to the U.S. Constitution, which doesn't provide for much more than armies, courts, and police, although it does provide for post offices and a few other things. And then after that, you might have classical liberals, and here Milton Friedman and Friedrich Hayek would be the most famous, and they would make all sorts of concessions, and I would put Rand Paul in with that group, where government can do a lot more, but still it's free enterprise. I, as a anarcho-libertarian, I would say get rid of government. It's just an abomination, and it doesn't do any good. It just kills more people than it saves, and it screws up the economy.
Interesting. So when you look at some of the problems that Wall Street's had in the last, say, 5-10 years, from you as your viewpoint, what do you see should be done, or what do you think could be done? Should anything be done to correct Wall Street? Well,
let me put the question in your mouth. What do you think the cause of it was? And I think the cause of it was the Fed. Ron Paul is very famous for saying, end the Fed. The Fed is creating all sorts of monetary mischief. If you look at the 100 years before and after the Fed's creation, it was in 1913. We're now in 2013. Look from 1813 to 1913. And the economy does have a few little dribbles here and there, mainly based on central banking. But after 1913, the oscillations are gigantic. They're a destabilizing element. We shouldn't, not end the Fed, but monitor the Fed or inspect the Fed. We shouldn't inspect them, we shouldn't monitor them, we just end them. And Janet Yellen should go back to teaching at Berkeley or wherever she is, because we don't need the Fed. We should just have a gold standard or a silver standard, or whatever the market decides, namely free market money. And if we had free market money, we wouldn't have these oscillations. We wouldn't have inflation. We wouldn't have this vast unemployment, although unemployment is created by other things beside the Fed, but the Fed is a big cause of unemployment and inflation. And they're supposed to, that's their mandate, to stop those two things, but they're creating those two things. So we should get rid of them.
Because it's supposed to be the best and the brightest, right?
Well, I
guide the
don't.
country, guide the economy?
Well, but that's central planning. I mean, that's what they did in the Soviet Union. They had the best and the brightest. Although I think the Austrians are the best and the brightest. I think those guys are a bunch of dummies. But that's what they did in the Soviet Union. They had central planning. And if we've learned anything from history, we know that central planning doesn't work very well, but the Fed is just central planning of money. Who the hell are they? How do they know what the interest rate should be or how much money should be created? These things are best left to the free enterprise system.
So, kind of trusting the people will make the best judgments for them, and overall that will make the best judgment for everyone?
It's not so much the people will make the best judgments, although I think the people through the free enterprise system will make the best judgments, because when they make bad judgments, they lose money. And therefore, they can't make as many judgments as before. I mean, you're wearing a lovely purple tie with green stripes or something, and ties are pretty good. Because if a company made a lousy tie, nobody would buy it and they'd go broke. So, yeah, the tie industry is working pretty well, and the wristwatch industry is working okay, because you have this weeding out system of free enterprise. When you do a good job, you make profits, you can expand. When you do a bad job, you lose money. You have to go into some other business or become an employee. Yeah, that system works pretty good. Adam Smith, the invisible hand, free enterprise, yeah. But why don't we apply it to everything? But in the U.S., we're becoming more Sovietized. We've got central planning and money. We've got central planning in the farm Department of Agriculture, giving all sorts of subsidies to farmers, and we have socialized highways, which kill 40,000 people a year. We have minimum wage laws, which we talked about before, which just create unemployment for unskilled workers. The list goes on and on and on. I don't know how many tens of thousands of pages of regulations that they keep coming up with every year. But Stalin would be, very sympathetic. Hey, you guys are turning commie. Very good. So I oppose all of that.
Yeah, here we are, America, the most anti-communist country on the planet, right?
BS. We're not. We might have won the Cold War, but they won the ideological war. I mean, Bush and Obama are really, well, I won't say commies, but they're verging in that direction. I mean, they're much more like European socialists, like Hollande in France or something. But those guys aren't so far ideologically away from the communists. So there's a commie under every bed. Got to watch out for those guys.
Yeah, not just the League monster, but it's interesting that you say you include Bush in that too.
Yeah,
because I think there's so many people who will label President Obama as a socialist. From the
Well, Obama really isn't a socialist. He's more of a fascist. And by fascist, I don't mean you have to have a little mustache and you have to go like that, or wear big boots or have a swastika. It's sort of more the Mussolini system. See, the only socialist thing that Obama did was took over Detroit, where he took some ownership. Socialism is defined as government ownership of the means of production. He doesn't do too much of that. The highways and the cars. But the rest, it's more regulation. Look, Hitler didn't own Stuka. Hitler didn't own BMW. Hitler didn't own Volkswagen. He just regulated them. That was the Mussolini-Hitler economic system. Well, that's roughly what Obama and Bush are doing. They're not owning things, they're regulating things. But the difference between socialists and fascists are, not that great. Because what's the big difference between whether you own it or can tell other people what to do? It's just a veneer of legality.
Yeah, it's still that exercise of power.
Yes.
One way or the other.
Precisely.
And so, what were you thinking as you watched the government shut down over healthcare reform last couple of weeks?
Well, if government is bad, then shut down government is good. I wish they would have shut more of it down. They didn't shut enough of it down for long enough. But that's the right way to go. Shut them down and privatize everything. We should have free enterprise. Free enterprise will make us free.
Let's see. How familiar are you with the website The Silk Road?
Well, reasonably familiar. I understand what's going on there. It's a website that sells illegal drugs, and we shouldn't have any illegal drugs. Rather, we should legalize them all. I misspoke when I said we shouldn't have any. Well, I guess it's true. We shouldn't have any illegal drugs because they should all be legal. We should legalize all drugs between consenting adults. I mean, have we learned nothing from the prohibition of another drug, namely alcohol? During alcohol prohibition, where people were killing each other and people were dying over bathtub gin. Well, it's the same thing. It's just a different kind of a drug. I mean, alcohol is sort of like a drug. And what should we do? Go back to prohibiting alcohol and have the mafia running around loose and young Italian men killing each other instead of young black men killing each other now? I mean, where is the black leadership? I mean, an inordinate, disproportionate number of young black men are dead because of these laws or are in jail because of these laws, and it's just playing havoc with the black community. And these guys are the black caucus in the Senate or the House are a disgrace because they're not helping their own people. And I don't mean to be racist about it. I don't think that they're their own people. Whites, blacks, it doesn't matter. This law plays havoc with everybody, although disproportionately with young black men.
Yeah, which you see here in New Orleans, we see in Baton Rouge.
Oh yeah.
Murder rates, the crime rates are astronomical.
Yeah. And if we legalize drugs, I don't say crime would go away entirely, but an awful lot of it would go away because an awful lot of it is predicated on fighting over turf and you know, if two gangs disagree about something, they shoot it out and kill innocent people. Whereas if two tie manufacturers had a dispute, they'd go to court. They don't shoot it out. And nowadays, if there are two wineries that have a dispute, they go to court. Whereas in the bad old days, they would have to shoot it out. So it's just sort of basic economics or basic common sense to legalize all drugs. And the Silk Road is a way of trying to legalize drugs unofficially. And the government is, you know, getting on their case.
Let's say you don't, I mean, it looks like you would say the government is going, you know, more regulation. You don't ever see us going deregulated, do you?
Well, every once in a while there's some sort of deregulation. I remember in, I guess it was the 70s or the 80s when the FAA, Federal Aviation Agency, I'm not sure which aviation agency was in charge, but we had airline deregulation. It used to be that you couldn't fly from here to there without getting government permission, and they did all sorts of studies showing that if you compared an airline trip intrastate where it wasn't regulated, like in a big state like Texas or California, the prices were much, much lower than if you took the same trip, say from, I don't know, Dallas to New Orleans is roughly as far from Dallas to El Paso. And the one is intrastate and the other is interstate. And the interstate was like triple, quadruple. So they did deregulate airlines, and every once in a while they'll deregulate something. I mean, I'm sort of against the U.S. for not being very free enterprise, but I have to look at other countries and compare to other countries. We're pretty free enterprise, which isn't saying much, but relatively speaking.
Well, I guess a couple of states now have decriminalized recreational marijuana. And
yes.
It seems like, you know, there's the poll the other day that Americans are in favor of legalizing pot.
Yeah, thank God for Washington State and Colorado. They're showing the way, and we do have legalized prostitution in Nevada and in many countries in Europe. So these are steps in the right direction. Every once in a while you get a little bit of deregulation, a little bit of freedom. Every once in a while taxes decrease, although the impetus is not in that direction. We're worsening in many ways. Things used to be better. Things used to be freer, even internationally. One of my own research projects is comparing the economic freedom of various countries around the world. And at one time, the U.S. was, third or fourth or fifth best. And now we're 11th or 12th or 16th. It keeps changing every year, and I haven't done research on that recently. But we're worsening internationally. But still, you know, if you're 15th best out of, 200 countries, it's not so bad. But you know, we're supposed to be the land of the free and the home of the brave, and we're a bunch of cowards, and we're not free. Cowards shooting people with drones who've never hurt us or never threatened us, and that's a whole other part of the libertarian or Ron Paul analysis.
I don't want to take up too much of your time. Anything else that you think is worth talking about as far as the Austrian theory and kind of where we're headed?
Well, I mean, I could talk for hours about stuff. I do. I'm a professor. I have to profess. I profess all the time.
Yeah. I'm sure you've got students who are waiting to hear from you and
Oh
paying
yeah,
good money to.
I have students and I have research I have to do, but I would just say that if I had to encapsulate it, Ron Paul is my man, and I hope he runs in 2016. He'll only be a young 80 then, and I'm not as much of a fan of his son, Rand Paul. I think Ron is much better, and I supported him in 2008 and 2012, and I supported him when he ran on the Libertarian Party ticket. So I support Ron Paul.